Welcome to the Movie Spoiler Club, the channel where you can watch movie, television and streaming series within minutes. Today we're going to spoil the movie Spider-Man 2, 2004. This movie story plot is about when a failed nuclear fusion experiment results in an explosion that kills his wife, Dr. Otto Octavius. Alfred Molina is transformed into Dr. Octopus, a cyborg with deadly metal tentacles. Doc Ock blames Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, for the accident and seeks revenge. Meanwhile, Spidey's alter ego, Peter Parker, faces fading powers and self-doubt. Complicating matters are his best friends, James Franco, hatred for Spider-Man, and his true loves, Kirsten Dunst, sudden engagement to another man. The movie opens with a shot of a billboard in New York. The face is familiar, that of a certain redhead that used to live next door. The voice of Peter Parker narrates, "She looks at me every day. Mary Jane Watson. Oh boy, if she only knew how I felt about her." Parker continues on, "But she can never know. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man." The next scene cuts in with a flimsy and scattered Peter Parker racing down a busy city street on a moped. In addition to his job as a photographer with the Daily Bugle, Peter doubles as a pizza delivery guy for Mr. Aziz. Today, like every day, he is late. Mr. Aziz is rightfully frustrated. Now Peter has 7 minutes to make this delivery or he won't be a delivery driver anymore. The streets are blocked and the clock is ticking. Peter is cutting through the middle to break through the traffic with hope that he will be on time. But traffic is really bad. Peter has to think fast. He dips into a side street and returns as Spider-Man. Your friendly neighborhood pizza delivery man racing against the clock. Try as he might, Peter arrives late and the customer refuses to pay for the pizzas. Mr. Aziz strips Parker his delivery sticker from his moped helmet and tells Peter to go home. Dejected, Peter finds himself at the Daily Bugle and Mr. Jameson is yelling in his face, "You're fired, Parker." Mr. Jameson is upset that Parker hasn't brought any new photos of Spider-Man for the paper. Peter can't catch a break. First the delivery job and now his position at the Bugle is in jeopardy. Later, Peter is on his way to class and he literally runs into Dr. Connors. Dr. Connors tells Peter that he missed his class and seems tired all the time. It's clear that Peter is struggling at school too. Peter defensively retorts that he plans on writing a paper on Dr. Octavius and thinks it will be worth the wait. As if the wait couldn't get any worse, Peter arrives at his Aunt May's house. He opens the door and is bombarded with surprise. Peter forgot his very own birthday. Aunt May, Harry Osborn, and Mary Jane are all there to celebrate their favorite nerd. Through these moments we catch up with our familiar cast of characters. Mary Jane is famous for her play at the local theater. Harry Osborn has spearheaded his father's position as CEO of Oscorp. Mary Jane ogles Peter the whole night and Harry complains that Peter never answers his phone calls. In an effort to reconnect, Harry offers Peter an invitation to meet Dr. Octavius later this week. Peter is elated and agrees immediately. After the party, Peter finds Aunt May asleep at the dinner table and sees eviction notices under her arms. Peter is visibly upset by seeing the news. For him, the responsibility is all his. Uncle Ben's death, Norman Osborn's death, and Aunt May's misfortune are his burden to bear. A lot has happened in the past 2 years since Uncle Ben lost his life and things don't seem to be looking up for Peter. Peter wanders outside to take in some fresh air and finds Mary Jane sitting on the stoop. The two are stuck in a trance and make their way towards each other until they are almost touching. It's clear that Mary Jane has feelings for Peter, but Peter remains true to his promise. When it's apparent that Peter won't make a move, she turns to leave. Before she heads back inside her house, she tells Peter that she met someone. This piques Peter's interest and promises to come to see her play. Mary Jane smirks warmly but asserts that he shouldn't disappoint her. The night has come to an end and Peter makes his way back to his apartment. The landlord stops him in his track, demanding rent. No surprise at all that Peter doesn't have the money. He barely has a job. All he has is $20 that Aunt May gave him for his birthday. The landlord snatches the bill from his hand and slams the door. Peter unlocks the door to his cold, dark apartment to sulk like a true superhero. It's a new day and things are looking up. Harry and Peter are together at Oscorp. Peter is finally going to meet Dr. Otto Octavius. Dr. Octavius seems less than thrilled but agrees to let Peter watch him work and ask a few questions. By the end of the night, Dr. Octavius and Peter seem like old friends from the past. This brilliant man of science is on the brink of something big. and Peter will be one of the first with the scoop. This kind of news will bring him some grace at school and at the Daily Bugle. Riding the high of meeting one of his heroes, Peter returns to his apartment to prepare for Mary Jane's play. Peter puts on the only suit in his closet that isn't the spider suit and heads out the door. He spends his last few dollars to buy some beautiful flowers for MJ. On his way to the theater, a car chase ensues. The cars are right on Peter's tail, which triggers Peter's spidey senses. Peter backflips off the moped just as they ran into him. A police car flips through the air heading straight to people on the street. Peter uses his web shooters to catch the car in midair and save the innocent people. Then it's off to catch the criminals, which for Spider-Man is always easy. Spidey catches up to the bad guys and strings them up on a street light with his webs. The night is saved, but now he is late for the play. Peter rushes to the front entrance, where the doorman notices his shoe is untied. Peter takes a breath and bends down to tie his shoe. The doorman gestures to Peter's tie. Peter glances down and adjusts his tie, and then proceeds toward the door. The doorman blocks him and tells him no one is allowed in after the doors close. Peter insists he has a ticket and that he made a promise, but the doorman refuses. Peter is forced to wait outside until the play ends. Once the play concludes, the people start emerging from the theater. Peter waits across the street for Mary Jane to make her appearance, hoping that maybe he can salvage what's left of their relationship. He watches her as she walks out onto the street and greets fellow castmates. Then a strange man approaches her and they embrace warmly. They walk away together with his arm around her shoulder. Startled and unnerved, Peter takes off into the night as Spider-Man, following the sounds of sirens. Suddenly during his chase, his webs fail to shoot and he loses his grip on the swing. Hopeless, Peter finds his mangled moped and heads home to his lowly apartment, his face toward the ground so that he doesn't see the wall of posters with Mary Jane's face plastered all over. The next morning, he tries to call Mary Jane and apologize but gets her answering machine. Another excuse from Peter Parker. MJ isn't buying it. Meanwhile, at Oscorp, Dr. Octavius unveils his nuclear fusion experiment. This device attaches to Dr. Octavius's spine with 4 smart arms that operate from Dr. Octavius's mind. The neural reactor prevents the smart arms from controlling him, ensuring that whoever the device is attached to remains in control of the arms. The reactor uses precious tritium to function, which is gratefully provided by Oscorp. Once activated, the tritium becomes a blazing ball of fire suspended by lasers. Things turn for the worse when the device becomes a magnet, ripping the metal from the walls, jewelry from necks, and pipe from the plumbing. Dr. Octavius reassures the audience that it is a minor infraction and the reactor will stabilize. Harry grows impatient and demands the reactor be shut down. Spider-Man swings in to grab Harry right as he is about to be taken out by some metal debris. Then the glass windows shatter from the pressure and the shards slice through Dr. Octavius' wife and she doesn't survive. If that's not enough, the neural reactor is shocked. The plot continues to thicken. Doc Ock is now mind-controlled by these smart arms. Peter's research paper is on hold. Every time he runs into Harry, he brings up topics about Spider-Man and how much he needs revenge for his father. Mary Jane won't give him the time of day. And lately, Peter is feeling torn between being Spider-Man or just Peter Parker. The weight of the world is beginning to feel like a bit much. At a press event, Parker is working as a photographer for the Bugle. There he finds Mary Jane with her new guy, John Jameson. He can shrug off their relationship until John makes an announcement over the microphone that Miss Mary Jane has just graciously accepted his marriage proposal. Peter is stunned, eager to get home. Peter Webb swings through his usual alleys when his webs fail again. This time he falls through clotheslines and crashes into a murky puddle. That night, Peter has a dream where he is visited by Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben is talking to Peter about his responsibility. The infamous words, "With great power comes great responsibility." Peter feels like he is living out Uncle Ben's dreams and not his own. Uncle Ben reaches out to Peter to shake on this promise, and Peter cannot accept. Peter wants to be Peter Parker. "I'm Spider-Man no more," Peter declares and throws his spider suit in an open trash can in the alley. Peter Parker is a brand new man. There's a pep to his step, and he is wearing his familiar spectacles. The sound of sirens causes him to momentarily question his decision, but quickly shovels a hot dog into his mouth before heading to class. Later that night, he even makes it to Mary Jane's play on time. After the show, they walk the streets together. Mary Jane can sense a change in Peter. Peter takes this opportunity to invite her to dinner innocently. Mary Jane, slightly insulted, and reminds him that she is engaged. Peter is no stranger to rejection and is simply happy to feel himself again. Later that week, Mary Jane and Peter agree to meet for lunch at a cafe. Mary Jane suspects that she has deeper feelings for Peter, and she has suspicion that Peter does too. Mary Jane asks Peter if she loves him, and Peter can't maintain eye contact to respond. Inside, he knows he loves her, and he knows that they could be together and that this is his moment. But he also knows that the world needs a hero. The world needs Spider-Man. Spidey senses tingle and Peter grabs Mary Jane just as a car comes crashing through the cafe. Everyone in the cafe scatters to safety. Mary Jane and Peter emerge from the wreckage and stand in the street trying to process the destruction that surrounds them. They can hear the sounds of footsteps approaching. Doc Ock is looking for Peter and demands that Peter find Spider-Man for him. Spider-Man quickly, or that he will rip the skin off of Mary Jane. This strikes Peter's nerves and they engage in a fight. Doc Ock kidnaps Mary Jane and takes off into the city. Peter snatches his discarded Spidey suit from the Daily Bugle in search of Doc Ock and Mary Jane. The two meet on a train and fight it out, while the train and its passengers whiz through the city. Doc Ock cuts the brakes and then disappears. It is up to Spider-Man to stop this train and save all the people inside. Using his web shooters, he attaches the train to the buildings on either side of the runaway train to reduce its speed. This plan works, but it takes all of Spider-Man's strength. He collapses. The passengers pull him inside to safety, but Doc Ock emerges and takes Spider-Man away. Doc Ock tows Spider-Man to Harry Osborn at his house in exchange for the precious tritium. Harry delivers and will finally get his revenge on Spider-Man. Harry pulls a dagger and rips the mask off of Spider-Man, paralyzed to see it as his close friend, Peter Parker. Peter awakes and rips the barbed wire, retraining him, and tries to explain to Harry that Doc Ock has MJ and they need to find them. Harry is of no help, too far stunned that his friend murdered his father. Peter finds Doc Ock back at the lab and attempts to sneak in. Doc Ock catches Spider-Man and another fight ensues. Peter ultimately convinces Doc Ock that this was his dream, and that intelligence is a gift. When Doc Ock learns that Peter is Spider-Man, the words resonate and Doc Ock agrees that this must come to an end. Spider-Man saves Mary Jane and his identity is revealed to her. Now she knows the hero that has saved her life more than once is also the geeky kid next door whom she adores. Mary Jane processes why Peter can't be in a relationship with her, but insists that no one can take on the world alone. She argues that someone should be by his side, and that person is her. When the world needs Spider-Man, she will be right next to him. Go get him, Tiger! Movie trivia. Do you know that if you look closely at Peter's apartment, you can see the picture he took of Mary Jane just before he was bitten by a radioactive spider? It was supposed to represent the last moment of innocence in Peter's life before it changed forever. This movie gets the movie rating of 7.3 from IMDb, Tomatometer rating of 93 and audience score of 82 from Rotten Tomatoes. Thank you for watching and be sure to hit like, subscribe, share your thoughts in the comment section, and hit the notification bell for the new movie spoiler video every week.